Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Brian. Kind of got a little messed up last week with the hurricane coming into my vicinity, so we're actually going to finish up last week's theme this week. Even though it is Monday, usually we start a new theme. We will be doing that for our second video. Today, though, we are going to wrap up misspelled band names, looking at a band called INVSN, INVSN. So let's dive into this. We've got the band INVSN. The song is Bom Bom. Let's hit it, see what they're bringing to the table.
Won't let another minute go to waste. You've got me for as long as it takes.
Not sure what I got, but it's all yours.
I'm hooked. Where are we going with this?
Don't have a lot, but it's all yours.
In parts, in full, in dreams. In parts, in full, in dreams.
No doubt. Let us lose control. Pick up the pieces as we go.
Really big, really bombastic, has a bit of a theatricality to it all. A lot of space too.
Lies disguised as promises.
Never asked to be born into this mess.
But we got secrets that no one else can touch.
Yeah, the use of the faster picking, possibly even tremolo picking, or texture. Very nice. In fact, interestingly, a lot of the decisions here are textual. Interesting second verse there.
Leave the world behind. Let us lose control. Pick up the pieces as we go. Long silence connected in dreams. Long silence connected in dreams.
A lot of really strong tension here because we're just sitting on one note. There's no movement at all. Yeah, so we've evolved this rhythmic idea from just one bar to a constant idea.
In your arms, I'm waiting for the cool.
really interesting. I'm pretty sure it's a guitar. I just don't know how they're making that sound. Very neat though. Wait, is it over? No. No, it's not over, right? All right, it's over. Um, hmm. So I kind of put this in the same realm as, say, what is that? Folk stuff. Folk, yeah. um, where it's primarily a single musical idea that is our bass line, and the vocals sit on top of that. They have the spotlight, and they are also the most present aspect of the song, also the most dynamic. They have movement to them. The melody lines of the vocals don't always necessarily change, but the lyrics themselves do. And in that way, much like when we checked out Folk Week a while ago, it's all about telling stories through music, where the music is more of a base for the story itself. We're not actually looking at a track that is trying to be musically dynamic in any way. It's sort of bardic, is that a word? Like bard tales, where the music basically is static. A simple chord progression, so that the story that the bard wants to tell, it can be told over it. A merger of poetry and song, if you will, where the poetry is greatly more important than the musical aspect. But unlike some of the folk stuff we've checked out so far, and the folk that I am familiar with, which admittedly is not a lot, this does do some really interesting things with the music, and that's what I want to touch on first is the textures. Unlike folk music, which tends to utilize chord progressions as the primary musical component, with maybe a melodic line to sit counterpoint at times, nothing here was really melodic in any sense. We did have a couple of no, we had no chord progression either. We could probably craft a chord based on the notes our vocals utilize, and we could probably create a chord progression for the song. There are certainly moments where I feel that it's mostly two chords, is what I feel. We have a higher one and a lower one, and we sort of just bounce back and forth at times. At other times, we just stay on a single idea. Um, but there really isn't a feeling of chord work at all in here. Every instrument is texture based. Whether it is tremolo picking that we're getting on a guitar to get that constant attack, or it's the chirps and the glissandos that we're getting out of that right guitar, we get those really interesting, almost industrial kind of sounds going on over there. The heavy percussion. Um, Everything is designed to craft an atmosphere without any notion or import given to melody or chord other than our lead vocals. I say lead vocals, but just the vocals in general. That's the only place that we have any melodic writing. And honestly, I think it's just because monotonous singing is just not normal for most people. I think it's very difficult to decide you're going to do lyrics and then just pick one note and stay on it. I don't think a lot of people can do that. I think that they could have gone that route if they wanted to. But I think the melodic component is just a byproduct of how most of us envision music. or most of us envision vocal work, I should say. So yeah, everything's textual. I want to point out real quick the drums. They're big. The lower ones that we get on those accented beats, not in the bigger moment towards the end at like minute 4 when we actually had a very full orchestration, but in every other aspect we have these very big booming lower drums. And based on the timbre, I'm kind of leaning towards timpanis, which is very cool because that's not an instrument that one I get to talk about too often, but it's also just not an instrument that pops up in pop or folk or rock or metal or really anything. It is one of those instruments that is just relegated to orchestral music, to classical music, and doesn't really get a chance to shine anywhere outside of that, despite being a beautiful percussion instrument. The tone on it is, oh man, it's so round, and it's kind of like the bass instrument of percussion. It has that nice round warmth to it, and just due to the size of the timpani, it has this massive reverb to it. It's a massive instrument. And they are big drums, usually set up in four, and they have a pedal on the bottom that allows you to tune the instrument. You can actually tune the note that the drum makes. A lot of drums, especially when we're talking about toms and snares and a lot of stuff that we fit on a kit, we have a drum key that we put onto a knob or something. Anyways, there's something that we can tighten or loosen on it, but it's not something that is easily done in real time. Whereas a timpani, usually you'll tune to four notes, but occasionally you'll need to do on-the-fly tuning, and that's where the foot pedals come in. That way you can get more than four notes out of just your four drums. And of course, you don't have to just have four drums, but I'm trying to think of how many you could ideally fit around you without having to run around. As long as you keep them in arm's width, just based on the diameter of these drums, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 tops can fit around. I mean, these are enormous drums. They really are. But they have this power, this width, this strength, this larger than life feeling about them, and I think that's what was going on here. Um, I could be wrong, but like I said, based on the timbre, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting. If they're not timpanis, then I think they're close to them. I don't think they're typical drum kit toms. They feel too big for that. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out because it's very cool. I really enjoyed hearing that. Like I said, it's not a timbre you get to hear too often in anything modern that's not classical. So if all the instruments are doing textural stuff or rhythmic stuff, that leaves us with our vocals. They are in charge of melody across the board. There is no other instrument that takes it. And what's really interesting about the vocals is that there's more than one vocalist. And I feel like this is definitely a positive. You guys know I love my layered vocals, I love my harmonies on my vocals, but I do think that there's a missed opportunity here. Maybe when we get into the lyrics, I'll be like, oh, everything makes sense. I understand why they opted not to do this, but we have trade offs. We start with a male vocal, and then we harmonize with a female vocal, and then we get just the female vocal, and I feel like we kind of play around with these combinations all throughout the track. Sometimes we get just one or the other, sometimes we get the harmony on them, but I really would have liked counterpoint. Give me both vocals simultaneously, especially since for the most part they're already panned. The majority of the times I heard the female vocals, they were widened out to the side, always to the side, where our male vocals were traditional or typically stationed in the middle. So we already had the distancing there. Give them two different melody lines. Let them coexist and do some counterpoint. But again, maybe we get into the lyrics and it just doesn't make sense to do that idea. Maybe there's a sense of unity or coming together that's supposed to be going on here, and it makes more sense for them to be isolated or together, but never together and doing their own thing. if that makes sense. Um, the last thing I want to touch on before we get into the lyrics, I think this is going to be a shorter video, is vibe, texture, emotion. What is the song saying musically? And honestly, I'm not quite sure. It's all over the place. There's definitely an isolation that we get. Oh, there is another thing I want to talk about, structure. There is an isolation in our verse. It is very withheld. We have our drums, we have these occasional texture guitar ideas, these little plinks and scratches, um, and then the vocals, and then lots of space. We have a 4 bar phrase where we have the big booming rhythmic idea from our drums in bars 1 and the first half of bar 2, and then nothing for the rest of bar 2, 3, and 4. A lot of the time we have silence or these little ambient tones, and then we come back in with the big booming drums again on beat. On the repetition of this 4 bar phrase. So there's just a lot of space going on that is only amplified by the fact that our vocalists also take pauses. We'll have, the vocals, the male vocals, and then they'll go for like 3 beats, and then they'll take a beat off, and then we'll have the dual vocals, and they'll go for like 4 beats, and then like take 2 or 3 off, and all these little breaks between the vocal lines are only embellished by all the space of the music. We have this big booming section, and then there's just a lot of nothing at the tail end of this 4 bar phrase. So when our vocalists decide that they need to take a break between their lines, there really is not a lot going on other than any reverb or decay from something that recently happened, or that bass rumble, which I just remembered was a thing. I don't remember it in the first verse, but it was definitely in the second. And it's just this rumbling underneath everything. It's almost turns into a white noise kind of thing where I forget about it as the song goes on. It just kind of shifts into the background, and it's this static kind of thing going on. Um, yeah, it's just even the rumbling right there introduces a lot of tension, which is where I want to take this next. There's also tension, kind of depending on how you feel about silence. In the silence, there's just the sparsity of it all can be kind of tense in places where you really feel like you want a beat to happen or a melody to happen or someone to say something, and they just don't. And then you just have this rumbling underneath, and these very screechy, scratchy, like I said, industrial kind of things coming from a guitar. It almost sounds like some sound effects you would hear in a horror film. Then we get to the chorus, and we actually have instrumentation coming in. The guitars are actually playing something, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're moving away from this sparse idea into something that's fuller. It's not going to be as tense now, and yeah, that's not right. The tension comes from a different angle, though, in that a lot of the chorus sits on a single chord that really wants to go somewhere, and they don't let it. Our guitars are constantly tremolo picking a single note. It is like a ringing in my ear that I can't get rid of. I desperately want it to go away or possibly even change, just become a different pitch, move towards something else, and it won't. It retains the note that it's picked. Occasionally, like I mentioned, we do kind of come down a little bit, implying a chordal vamp between 2 chords. But we retain the first one for so long that the resolution into the other one is welcome, but so quickly lost before returning back, because assuming we're working on what feels like maybe a 4 bar phrase again, or maybe an 8, I don't quite remember how long we held on to that note. It seemed like an eternity to me at the time. It's always 75% of the phrase that we are in the single note, and it's only a quarter of the phrase that we are in the resolution. So we are always in the tense moment that wants to push forward. And when we do get the resolution we want, it is short lived when we return back to the tense feeling. And that is the entire song. It's either tense because there's not enough going on, or it's tense because there's too much noise that is static. It's static noise, honestly. It's not dynamic. It doesn't go anywhere. It tries to at times and is quickly, relapses back to the noisy buzzing. The only sort of relief from any of this is to hone in specifically on the vocal line, which is very harmonious, very palatable, and I love the harmonies on it as well. But it is the silver lining in the track, so to speak, if we look at things as tense and suspenseful versus relaxing and calming and palatable. It is the small moment that is dwarfed by what the music is doing at all times. And this kind of leads into what I was talking about structure. The second verse I said was very bold when we listened to it. There's almost no vocals here. Where our first one introduced space between lines, but pretty much always had a line going at any specific moment, our second verse was kind of empty as far as vocals go. The music was the same. Sparse drumming, lots of silence in the last two bars of the phrase, the bass rumble, the odd guitar screech off to the side, but there were no vocals to sort of fill in the space a lot of the time. We would get a vocal line and then it would kind of fall in line with what the drums were doing and then just leave 2 and 3 bars open of silence. I think there was even one time when we went 7 bars long. We had one vocal idea in bar 1, and then bars 2 through 8 for the 8-bar phrase was silence. The vocals didn't do anything. You just got to exist with the very sparse instrumentation going on. Interesting variation. Usually, when I talk about bands bringing back or returning to a verse, going to verse 2 and changing it up, they are adding things or replacing things, not usually taking things away wholesale. And just saying, well, now we're in a more minimalistic version of our of the verse that we heard previously. Very interesting way to go about it. I'm so intrigued about what the lyrics are. I didn't pick up any lyrics at all because I was so enthralled by just the atmosphere, the emotion of the track, and the tension of it all really sucked me in. So yeah, I guess let's get to some lyrics here. Bom Bom. With no B's at the end, just B-O-M. B-O-M, B-O-M. Invasion? What album is this? Beautiful Stories. Alright, here we go. I don't know why they didn't come up the first time. Oh, there is a bridge. I wonder if the bridge is the big moment at the end, because to me, that was a variation on the chorus. A lot of the same ideas, just with a larger orchestration, more instruments, but still retaining the idea of tension and more attacks, but sitting on the same note or pitch, and then having the vocals sit on top of that. So it's interesting that it's listed as a bridge here when I just saw it as an adaptation of the chorus. Won't let another minute go to waste. You've got me for as long as it takes. Not sure what I've got, but it's all yours. Don't have a lot, but it's all yours, in part, in full, in dreams. No doubt. So we have somebody who is very certain about their decision. I won't waste another minute. Their decision is to fully allow their body to be devoted towards someone or something else. You've got me for as long as it takes. I don't know what I have, but it is all yours. Interestingly, there is some uh, putting oneself down here. At the third line is I'm not sure what I've got, but the fourth line is I don't have a lot, but it's all yours. That's repeated. The first time shows a sort of a soft put down, a soft negative view of oneself. Usually if you have a strong sense of self, you know your worth, you know your skills, you can tell people what you can do. Hopefully you're not an egomaniac and you also know your shortcomings and where you are not as strong. But, some people will play that up as well. They'll just talk themselves up a big game. This is the exact opposite. This person has a very low sense of self. Um, they say, I don't know what I have. And then they follow it up with, I really don't have a lot. But there's this determination to give it to this project or to this person. It says, in part, in full, in dreams. That line I'm not quite sure of. It's interesting that we go from what I have is all yours, implying an all encompassing devotion of oneself. And then it says in parts. Oh, okay. And then in full. But the in dreams is interesting to me because that might also portray not just the physical self, but the mental or possibly even subconscious self is also devoted to this project or person. The chorus says, let us lose control. Pick up the pieces as we go and leave the world behind. So ditch inhibitions and basically just do whatever and what is it? Consequences be damned kind of thing. We'll deal with the bridges. We'll deal with the burned bridges when we get there kind of vibe. We'll lose control and pick up the pieces as we go. Any destruction along the way, we'll clean up later. We will worry about the consequences after the fact, not before we make the decisions. And it says we will leave the world behind. Verse 2 is half as long as verse 1, line wise. We only have 4 lines versus the 7 from verse 1, which is what I talked about. There just isn't a lot of singing in verse 2, despite the musical section probably being about the same length. So anyways, they were last to discuss these promises, never asked to be born into this mess, but we got secrets that no one else can touch. There are secrets. That will be enough. Hmm. I'm gonna have to move on from that one. I'm kind of leaning into an idea of power, right? We have secrets that no one else can know. There's power in that, and those secrets will be enough, right? So what we can withdraw or what we can withhold from others gives us power over them, gives us power over our lives, possibly. There is power in secrets. I don't think that's quite debatable. Um, And I think that's what those 2 lines are alluding to. Never asked to be born into this mess. I think it's pretty straightforward. Nobody's asked to be born, but they still have to deal with life. But the first line, they were last to discuss these promises. I don't know. The bridge just says, oh, the silence, connected in dreams. It repeats that. Yeah, the silence projected on me. Come on. Right now, we're the only ones around. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I kind of the first stanza I understand. I mean the first verse, sorry. I mean it is a stanza, but the first verse I understand. The chorus I get, but I have a tough time connecting it to the first verse. And then from then on, the second verse and the bridge and the ending, like I have a vague idea on them, but also connecting them to the rest of the lyrics is Going a bit over my head. I'm not seeing the tissues there to bring it all together. The connective tissues. So there's definitely a we though. There's two, right? The first verse is all about I can give to you. The chorus is let us lose control. Verse two, possibly speaking in second or third person. They were last, so we have they. But we got secret. Oh no, okay, it's not in third. I'm talking about a different they. But anyways, we return to the we, so it's two or more people at least. And then the bridge is about being connected in dreams. So I think the duality in the vocals, having them isolated and also harmonizing, works really well with bringing the idea together that they are in their own problems, kind of, so to speak, as the second verse showcases, but also in it together. They have their own baggage, but they are tackling their issues and projects and lives as a group of two people or more, possibly. But we only have two vocalists. So yeah, it makes sense not to necessarily do uh, the counterpoint idea that I had presented because this is about two people coming together and uh, losing control and leaving the world behind together, not about two isolated peoples. But as for any connection beyond that, I've got nothing. It's a beautiful track though, and I really love the tension that sits under the beautiful vocal performance. I don't know that I would listen to it again. It does put me in a really interesting emotional space just because of all the tension that's present, but it is beautifully constructed. So, those are my thoughts on INVSN's Bom Bom. And I'm glad the person who recommended this told me because I would never have got Invasion out of INVSN. I would probably got Envision or Envision because I could be quite literal at times. Yeah, those are my thoughts though on the track. That's where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not, anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to correct me on or add on to what I stated. Please let me know. Above that, if you could head into the description box, there's a link in there for Linktree, which will take you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel on it. You can support the channel in a variety of ways, join the Patreon, and gain all sorts of abilities to help craft the future of the channel. You can also connect with several of the communities that sit around the YouTube channel. Above that, if you could like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this video. I did mention that instead of a special selection for our second video today, we're going to be doing this week's theme, which is War! Yeah, it's got 3 exclamations on it, so I had to say it like that. But every song title has to have the word war in it this week. So we're going to be checking out System of a Down's War. Now, I mean, technically it came out 3 minutes ago if you're watching this live, but whatever. It is the second video for today. Go ahead and check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to continue on with the regularly scheduled stuff of a themed video and a special selection like we typically do. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.